It's 13th of August 2010, and we come to Majjhima Nikāya Sutta 61, Ambalatthikarahulovada Sutta, advice to Rahula at Ambalatthika. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. On that occasion, the Venerable Rahula was living at Ambalatthika. Then when it was evening, the Blessed One rose from meditation and went to the Venerable Rahula at Ambalatthika. The Venerable Rahula saw the Blessed One coming in the distance and made a seat ready and set out water for washing the feet. The Blessed One sat down on the seat made ready and washed his feet. The Venerable Rahula paid homage to him and sat down at one side. Stop here for a moment. As you know, Venerable Rahula was the son of the Buddha, and in this sutta, I guess he was still quite young. That's why the Buddha was admonishing him about not telling lies. And you see here the monks during the Buddha's time, when the Buddha comes or the teacher comes, they make ready the seat and set out water for washing the feet. And after the teacher has washed the feet, then they pay homage. Then the Blessed One left a little water in the water vessel and asked the Venerable Rahula, Rahula, do you see this little water left in the water vessel? Yes, Venerable Sir. Even so little, Rahula, is the recluseship of those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. Then the Blessed One threw away the little water that was left and asked the Venerable Rahula, Rahula, do you see that little water that was thrown away? Yes, Venerable Sir. Even so, Rahula, those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie have thrown away their recluseship. Then the Blessed One turned the water vessel upside down and asked the Venerable Rahula, Rahula, do you see this water vessel turned upside down? Yes, Venerable Sir. Even so, Rahula, those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie have turned their recluseship upside down. Then the Blessed One turned the water vessel right way up again and asked the Venerable Rahula, Rahula, do you see this hollow, empty water vessel? Yes, Venerable Sir. Even so, hollow and empty, Rahula, is the recluseship of those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. Stop here for a moment. So here you see the Buddha is emphasizing to him through this simile of this empty vessel that if he tells a deliberate lie, his recluseship or monkhood is thrown away like the water and is empty of this monkhood. So the fact that the Buddha can admonish him about telling lies probably shows that he was very young at that time. Then the Buddha continued, suppose, Rahula, there were a royal tusker elephant with tusks as long as chariot poles, full-grown in stature, high-bred and accustomed to battle. In battle he would perform his task with his 4 feet and his hind feet, with his 4 quarters and his hind quarters, with his head and his ears, with his tusks and his tail. Yet he would keep back his trunk. That his rider would think, this royal tusker elephant with tusks as long as chariot poles, etc., performs his task in battle with his 4 feet and his hind feet, etc. Yet he keeps back his trunk. He has not given up his life. For when the royal tusker elephant performs his task in battle with his 4 feet and hind feet, with his 4 quarters and his hind quarters, with his head and his ears, with his tusks and his tail, and also with his trunk, then his rider would think, this royal tusker elephant with tusks as long as chariot poles, etc., performs his task in battle with his 4 feet and his hind feet, etc., and also with his trunk. He has given up his life. Now there is nothing this royal tusker elephant would not do. So too, Rahula, when one is not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie, There is no evil, I say, that one would not do. Therefore, Rahula, you should train thus. I will not utter a falsehood even as a joke. Let's stop here for a moment. This simile the Buddha has given about the royal tusker elephant is quite interesting. How this elephant can be trained to the extent that he's willing to give up his life. You notice here, the one who has not yet been trained to that stage, he keeps back his trunk. Why? Because his trunk is the softest part. It's most, it's most, it's most delicate, or it's most, his weakest point is his trunk. So, when he's willing to even use his trunk in battle, then he's willing to lay down his life. So well has been this elephant has been trained. So the Buddha uses the converse to say that if a person is not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie, then there is no evil. Then he will not do because he's a shameless person. What do you think, Rahula? What is the purpose of a mirror? For the purpose of reflection, Venerable Sir. So too, Rahula, an action with the body should be done after repeated reflection. An action by speech should be done after repeated reflection. An action by mind should be done after repeated reflection. Rahula, when you wish to do an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Would this action that I wish to do with the body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I wish to do with the body would lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results, then you definitely should not do such an action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I wish to do with the body would not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, with pleasant results, then you may do such an action with the body. Also, Rahula, while you are doing an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Does this action that I am doing with the body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I am doing with the body leads to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results, then you should suspend such a bodily action. For when you reflect, if you know this action that I am doing with the body does not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, with pleasant results, then you may continue in such a bodily action. Also, Rahula, after you have done an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Does this action that I have done with the body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Was it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I have done with the body leads to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it was an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results, then you should confess such a bodily action, reveal it, and lay it open to the teacher or to your wise companions in the holy life. Having confessed it, revealed it, and laid it open, you should undertake restraint for the future. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I have done with the body does not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it was a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, pleasant results. You can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, the Buddha is saying that bodily action, you should reflect before you do any bodily action. Consider whether it's wholesome or unwholesome. And even while you are doing also you should reflect. And even after doing, you should also reflect. And so if it is unwholesome, you should not do it or should not have done it. But if it is wholesome, then you can do it and continue doing it. Similarly, for speech and for mental action by the mind. Rahula, whatever recluses and Brahmins in the past purified their bodily action, their verbal action and their mental action, all did so by repeatedly reflecting thus. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the future will purify their bodily action, their verbal action and their mental action, all will do so by repeatedly reflecting thus. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the present are purifying their bodily action, their verbal action and their mental action, all are doing so by repeatedly reflecting thus. Therefore, Rahula, we should train thus. We will purify our bodily action, our verbal action and our mental action by repeatedly reflecting upon them. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Rahula was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. That's the end of the sutta. In the holy life or the spiritual path, when we practice the spiritual path, the very basic, the first thing that we should practice is to be careful of these three karmas through the body, speech and mind. That is a very basic thing. That is the first step. If we cannot cultivate wholesome karma through the body, speech and mind, and avoid unwholesome karma, then this very first step, if we can't do, then we cannot progress at all on the spiritual path. And that is why the Buddha's words are so important. So, like this first part, the Buddha is talking about lying, telling Rahula not to tell any deliberate lie. So this lie comes under verbal karma. So, unfortunately, I have seen some monks, because they don't study the suttas, they don't know such basic things, and they go and practice meditation and put a lot of effort and all that. But I see they cannot progress because this very basic step. The first step itself, they don't put effort to reflect on their own bodily karma, verbal karma and mental karma. Now we come to Sutta 62, Maharahulovada Sutta, the greater discourse of advice to Rahula. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anatta Pindika's spa. Then when it was morning, the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, went into Savatthi for alms. The Venerable Rahula also dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, followed close behind the Blessed One. Then the Blessed One looked back and addressed the Venerable Rahula thus: Rahula, any kind of material form, whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all material form should be seen as it actually is, with proper wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And Rahula asked, only material form, Blessed One? Only material form, Sublime One? And the Buddha said, material form, Rahula, and feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. Then the Venerable Rahula considered thus: who would go into town for alms today when personally admonished by the Blessed One? Thus he turned back and sat down at the root of a tree, holding his legs crosswise, setting his body erect, and establishing mindfulness in front of him. Now stop here for a moment. So here you see Venerable Rahula was going to follow the Buddha on Pindapata, alms round. when the Buddha gave him advice about the five aggregates, body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness, to consider it with proper wisdom, that it is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Then he thought, he's been given this advice how he should put it into practice. So he sat under a tree and meditated. It shows Ambalatthikarahulovada is very diligent. The Venerable Sariputta saw him sitting there and addressed him thus: Rahula, develop mindfulness of breathing. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and great benefit. Then when it was evening, the Venerable Rahula rose from meditation and went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and asked the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, how is mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and great benefit? I'll stop here for a moment. So here you see, probably in this sutta, was spoken, Venerable Rahula was still quite young also. That's why when Venerable Sariputta told him to practice mindfulness of breathing, he wasn't sure how to practice it. So he asked the Buddha for advice. So you see, in the morning he went Pindapata and sat under the tree. So the whole day he was meditating. And when the sun set, then only he went to see the Buddha. And the Buddha said, Rahula, whatever internally belonging to oneself is solid, solidified and clung to, that is, head, hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinew, bone, marrow, kidney, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lung, large intestine, small intestine, contents of the stomach, feces, and whatever else internally belonging to oneself is solid, solidified and clung to. This is called the internal earth element. Now both the internal earth element and the external earth element are simply earth element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the earth element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the earth element. So here the internal earth element refers to whatever is hard, because the earth signifies hardness, hardness element. So whatever is hard in the body is considered the internal earth element, and it should be seen, the Buddha says, as not mine, not I, not myself. What Rahula is the water element. The water element may be either internal or external. What is the internal water element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is water, watery and clung to, that is, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tear, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joint, urine, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is water, watery and clung to. This is called the internal water element. Now both the internal water element and the external water element are simply water element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the water element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the water element. Stop here for a moment. The water element is whatever is watery, and water has the characteristic of cohering together and giving whatever it is in shape. For example, our body has this shape because of the water element. If we were to dehydrate our body completely, then it will turn into powder and it will crumble. So water has a property of cohering and giving shape. What Rahula is the fire element. The fire element may be internal or external. What is the internal fire element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is fire, fiery and clung to. That is, that by which one is warmed, ages and is consumed, and that by which what is eaten, drunk, consumed and tasted gets completely digested. or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is fiery and clung to. This is called the internal fire element. Now both the internal fire element and the external fire element are simply fire element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus, as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the fire element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the fire element. Stop here for a moment. So the fire element refers to the heat element. This fire element warms us and makes us age and helps in digestion. What Rahula is the air element. The air element may be either internal or external. What is the internal air element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is air, airy and clung to. That is, upgoing winds, downgoing winds, winds in the belly, winds in the bowels, winds that course through the limbs, in-breath and out-breath, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is air, airy and clung to. This is called the internal air element. Now both the internal air element and the external air element are simply air element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the air element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the air element. Let's stop here for a moment. This air element has the characteristic of motion because of the air inside us. The winds move and the blood flows, etc. So the air element refers to what causes motion. What Rahula is the space element. The space element may be either internal or external. What is the internal space element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is space, spatial and clung to. That is, the holes of the ears, the nostrils, and the door of the mouth, and the aperture whereby what is eaten, drunk, consumed, and tasted gets swallowed, and where it collects, and whereby it is excreted from below, and whatever else internally belonging to oneself is space, spatial, and clung to. This is called the internal space element. Now both the internal space element and the external space element are simply space element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the space element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the space element. So the space element is space or whatever is spatial. And the four great elements, earth, water, fire, wind, plus the space element counts for the body. Our body consists of these 5 elements. And then the Buddha continued, Rahula, develop meditation that is like the earth. For when you develop meditation that is like the earth, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as people throw clean things and dirty things, excrement, urine, spittle, pus and blood on the earth, and the earth is not horrified, humiliated and disgusted because of that. So too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like the earth. For when you develop meditation that is like the earth, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Stop here for a moment. So the Buddha is telling him to develop the meditation that is like the earth, which is not moved by whatever clean or dirty things are thrown on it. It is not horrified, humiliated or disgusted. In other words, it's telling Rahula to develop the mind so it becomes quite solid and unshakable, not moved by external sense objects, not moved by feelings, etc. Rahula, develop meditation that is like water. For when you develop meditation that is like water, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as people wash clean things and dirty things, excrement, urine, spittle, pus and blood in water, and the water is not horrified, humiliated and disgusted because of that. So too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like water. For when you develop meditation that is like water, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Similarly, the Buddha says, be unmoving like the water. Rahula, develop meditation that is like fire. For when you develop meditation that is like fire, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as people burn clean things and dirty things, excrement, urine, spittle, pus and blood in fire, and the fire is not horrified, humiliated and disgusted because of that, so too Rahula, develop meditation that is like fire. For when you develop meditation that is like fire, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Rahula, develop meditation that is like air. For when you develop meditation that is like air, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as the air blows on clean things and dirty things, on excrement, urine, spittle, pus and blood, and the air is not horrified, humiliated and disgusted because of that, so too Rahula, develop meditation that is like air. For when you develop meditation that is like air, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Rahula, develop meditation that is like space. For when you develop meditation that is like space, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as space is not established anywhere, so too Rahula, develop meditation that is like space. For when you develop meditation that is like space, arisen, agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is basically telling Rahula to develop the mind to be so strong, so unshakable, which is only possible through strong concentration. Then only the mind can be unmoving. Whatever contacts invade, whatever contacts the mind comes in contact with, it is unmoving. Rahula, develop meditation on loving kindness. For when you develop meditation on loving kindness, any ill will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on compassion. For when you develop meditation on compassion, any cruelty will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on joy. For when you develop meditation on joy, any discontent will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on equanimity. For when you develop meditation on equanimity, any aversion will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on foulness. For when you develop meditation on foulness or unattractiveness, any lust will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on the perception of impermanence. For when you develop meditation on the perception of impermanence, the conceit, I am, will be abandoned. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, these few lines are very important. You can see here the opposites. For example, the opposite of metta, loving kindness, is ill will or anger. So when you develop loving kindness, metta, you overcome ill will. So if a person has a bad temper, prone to anger, then he should practice metta more. And then compassion, the opposite of compassion is cruelty. So we develop compassion to cut off any cruel thoughts, any tendency to cruelty in us. And then we develop joy, and when we are happy and joyful, we will be contented. Discontent will not arise. And then when we develop equanimity, aversion towards unpleasant things, unpleasant people, etc., will be abandoned. And then we develop meditation on foulness of the body, unattractiveness of the body, to cut lust, because a normal person has a lot of lust. So when we practice unattractiveness of the body, for example, the way the Buddha taught is to to meditate on the 32 parts of the body. You recite the 32 parts of the body, head, hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinew, bone, marrow, kidney, heart, etc. So when you go through these 32 parts of the body, slowly you contemplate one by one. That is one way to see it clearly. And then when you chant the 32 parts of the body quickly, that is samatha practice to attain concentration. Both can be practiced. So the purpose of meditating on the powerlessness of the body is to cut off lust. And meditation, the perception of impermanence, to see impermanence in everything, to see impermanence of everything in the world, especially the body and the mind. If we can see impermanence in the 5 aggregates, body and the mind, body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness, then it helps us to cut the conceit, I am, this perception of a self. So these few sentences here are very important, good to remember them. Opposite of loving kindness is ill will. Opposite of compassion is cruelty. Opposite of joy is discontent. Opposite of equanimity is aversion. And then when we meditate on the foulness of the body, that helps us to cut lust. When we meditate on the perception of impermanence of everything in the world, it helps us to cut the perception of a self, of a I am. Okay, then the Buddha continued. Ahula, develop meditation on mindfulness of breathing. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and great benefit. And how is mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated? So that it is of great fruit and great benefit. Here Rahula, a monk, having gone to the forest or to the root of a tree or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, sets his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him. Ever mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he understands, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he understands, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he understands, I breathe out short. He trains thus, I shall breathe in, experiencing the whole body of the breath. He trains thus, I shall breathe out, experiencing the whole body of breath. He trains thus, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily volition. He trains thus, I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily volition. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, when we practice mindfulness of the breath, if it's a long breath, we know that it's a long breath. If it's a short breath, we know it is a short breath. Also, we must be able to distinguish whether the breath is incoming or outgoing, breathing in or breathing out, and experiencing the whole breath, you breathe in. You notice here, the Buddha's method of meditation on the breath is to experience the breath itself, and to know, and then this last part, experience the whole body of the breath, then tranquilizing the bodily volition. What is the bodily volition? This is Kaya Sankara. That means the bodily volition refers to the breath. Earlier we saw in the sutta that the bodily volition refers to the breath itself. So here he's saying, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the breath. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the breath. So this meditation is about the breath itself. Unfortunately, later books like the Visuddhimagga, instead of teaching you to meditate on the breath, they teach you to meditate at a particular point. This is not mentioned by the Buddha. You don't have to restrict yourself to a particular point. The point is to notice the whole breath coming in and out. The breath coming in and out. It is the breath itself we meditate on, not the particular point. Like in the Visuddhimagga, they tell you either to put your attention on your upper lip or the tip of your nose, etc. This is not what is taught by the Buddha. And nowadays, some Burmese monks, they tell you to meditate on the abdomen. rising and falling of the abdomen. This is also not according to the sutta. The sutta is telling you to put your attention on the breath itself. But initially, of course, because of sloth and torpor, it's very difficult to get a feeling of the breath or to notice the breath. But it doesn't matter as long as you can differentiate between the in-breath and an out-breath. That's enough. As long as you know you're breathing in or you're breathing out. Even though you cannot notice it very clearly, that is enough. Then as you continue doing that, you can just follow the breath. After some time, the mind starts to clear. When the mind starts to clear, then you'll be able to notice more clearly. To continue, it trains us as a breathe in, experiencing delight. It trains us as a breathe out, experiencing delight. It trains us as a breathe in, experiencing pleasure. It trains us as a breathe out, experiencing pleasure. It trains us as a breathe in, experiencing the mental volition. It trains us as a breathe out, experiencing the mental volition. It trains us as a breathe in, tranquilizing the mental volition. It trains us as a breathe out, tranquilizing the mental volition. Okay, stop here for a moment. So here, this one, you cannot force yourself to experience delight. If you practice the earlier part, keeping your attention on the breath, and slowly tranquilizing the breath, and you keep on doing that, then slowly the mind becomes more concentrated, then delight, piti will arise, and sukha, pleasure. So when you come to that stage, then you experience it. You cannot force yourself to experience it. All these steps later, they come naturally. And then the mental volition refers to feeling and perception. Feeling and perception. So he experiences the feeling and perception, and then tranquilizing the feeling and perception, tranquilizing the mind. He trains us. I shall breathe in, experiencing the mind. He trains us. I shall breathe out, experiencing the mind. He trains us. I shall breathe in, gladdening the mind. He trains us. I shall breathe out, gladdening the mind. He trains us. I shall breathe in, concentrating the mind. He trains us. I shall breathe out, concentrating the mind. He trains us. I shall breathe in, liberating the mind. He trains us. I shall breathe out, liberating the mind. He trains us. I shall breathe in, contemplating impermanence. He trains us, I shall breathe out, contemplating impermanence. He trains us, I shall breathe in, contemplating fading away. He trains us, I shall breathe out, contemplating fading away. He trains us, I shall breathe in, contemplating cessation. He trains us, I shall breathe out, contemplating cessation. He trains us, I shall breathe in, contemplating relinquishment. He trains us, I shall breathe out, contemplating relinquishment. Rahula. That is how mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, so that it is of great fruit and great benefit. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way, even the final in-breaths and out-breaths are known as they cease, not unknown. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Rahula was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. It's the end of the sutta. So this mindfulness of breathing is not an easy meditation object. The way the Buddha taught his disciples is to not allow the mindfulness to lapse. Every breath must be known, so that they put their attention on the breath all the time, whether sitting or standing or walking or lying down. Always remembering to put the attention on the meditation object. That is sati. So that's how the Buddha's disciples practice until the mindfulness is 24 hours a day. That's why here the Buddha says. Even the last breath, they are aware. They are aware of even the last breath. So these later steps in the practice, you don't have to worry about it. As you progress, It will come naturally. You can't force yourself to practice every step of it. So this sutta, this advice to Rahula is, the Buddha says in the beginning, is see the five aggregates, basically body and mind, as not mine, not I, not myself. Then after that, when Rahula asked the Buddha about meditation, and the Buddha said to practice meditation so that the mind becomes unmoving, just like the elements are unmoving. So the mind should develop to that stage. That means to have strong samadhi, concentration. Also, the Buddha said to practice metta, loving kindness, compassion, karuna, and joy, mudita, and equanimity, upekkha, and also to meditate or contemplate the foulness of the body, and to contemplate the impermanence of everything in the world. And then the Buddha ends with the steps in the mindfulness of breathing. Okay, now we come to the next sutta, 63, Culamalunkya Sutta, the shorter discourse to Malunkya Buddha. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Then while the Venerable Malunkya Buddha was alone in meditation, the following thought arose in his mind. These speculative views have been undeclared by the Blessed One, set aside and rejected by him, namely, the world is eternal, and the world is not eternal. The world is finite, the world is infinite. The soul is the same as the body, and the soul is one thing and the body another. After death, the Tathagata exists. After death, the Tathagata does not exist. After death, the Tathagata both exists and does not exist. And after death, the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist. The Blessed One does not declare these to me, and I do not approve of and accept the fact that he does not declare these to me. So I shall go to the Blessed One and ask him the meaning of this. If he declares to me either the world is eternal or the world is not eternal, etc., then I will lead the holy life under him. If he does not declare these to me, then I will abandon the training and return to the lower life. Stop here for a moment. So this Venerable Malunkya Buddha, instead of putting his mind on his meditation object, his mind is starting to stray and thinking why the Buddha did not explain all these views to him that external sect teachers accept. So the Buddha never mentioned any one of these. So he's starting to doubt the Buddha. And he says if the Buddha does not explain all these to him, he will disrobe and go back to the lay life. Then when it was evening, the Venerable Malunkya Buddha rose from meditation and went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and told him, Dear Venerable Sir, while I was alone in meditation, the following thought arose in my mind. These speculative views have been undeclared by the Blessed One. If he does not declare these to me, then I will abandon the training and return to the lower life. If the Blessed One knows the world is eternal, let the Blessed One declare to me the world is eternal. If the Blessed One knows the world is not eternal, let the Blessed One declare to me the world is not eternal. If the Blessed One does not know either the world is eternal or the world is not eternal, then it is straightforward for one who does not know and does not see to say, I do not know, I do not see. If the Blessed One knows the world is finite, the world is infinite, the soul is the same as the body, etc., let the Blessed One declare to me. If the Blessed One knows, let the Blessed One declare that to me. If the Blessed One does not know, then it is straightforward for one who does not know and does not see to say, I do not know, I do not see. Let's stop here for a moment. So you see this arrogant disciple is come to challenge the Buddha, whether the Buddha knows or not. To declare to him, otherwise he doesn't want to continue to be a disciple of the Buddha. Then the Buddha said, How then, Malunkya Buddha, did I ever say to you, Come, Malunkya Buddha, lead the holy life under me, and I will declare to you, the world is eternal, or the world is not eternal, etc. No, Venerable Sir. Then did you ever tell me, I will lead the holy life under the Blessed One, and the Blessed One will declare to me, the world is eternal, or the world is not eternal, etc.? No, Venerable Sir. That being so, misguided man, who are you and what are you abandoning? Let's stop here for a moment. So the Buddha is telling him, when you came to be my disciple, did I ever tell you that I will declare all these things to you? Did I make this bargain? He said no. And then when you came to be my disciple, did you say that I must declare all these things to you when you become my disciple? And he says no. Then the Buddha said, foolish man, we did not set up these terms. So who are you to say all these things? And the Buddha continued, if anyone should say thus, I will not lead the holy life under the Blessed One, until the Blessed One declares to me, the world is eternal or the world is not eternal, etc., that would still remain undeclared by the Tathagata, and meanwhile that person would die. Suppose, Malunkya Buddha, a man were wounded by an arrow, thickly smeared with poison, and his friends and companions, his kinsmen and relatives, brought the surgeon to treat him. The man would say, I will not let the surgeon pull out this arrow until I know whether the man who wounded me was a noble or a Brahmin, or a merchant or a worker. And he would say, I will not let the surgeon pull out this arrow until I know the name and clan of the man who wounded me, or until I know whether the man who wounded me was tall or short or of middle height, or until I know whether the man who wounded me was dark or brown or golden skinned, or until I know whether the man who wounded me lives in such a village or town or city, or until I know whether the bow that wounded me was a long bow or a crossbow, or until I know whether the bowstring that wounded me was fiber or reed or sinew or hemp or bark, or until I know whether the shaft that wounded me was wild or cultivated, or until I know with what kind of feathers the shaft that wounded me was fitted, whether those of a vulture or a crow or a hawk or a peacock or a stork, or until I know with what kind of sinew the shaft that wounded me was bound, whether that of an ox or a buffalo or a lion or a monkey, or until I know what kind of arrow it was that wounded me, whether it was hoof-tipped or curved or barbed or calf-toothed or oleander. All this would still not be known to that man, and meanwhile he would die. So too, Malunkya Buddha, if anyone should say thus, I will not lead the holy life under the Blessed One, until the Blessed One declares to me, the world is eternal or the world is not eternal, etc., that would still remain undeclared by the Tathagata, and meanwhile that person would die. Stop here for a moment. This is a very classic simile that the Buddha is teaching here, that if a man was wounded, fatally wounded with an arrow thickly smeared with poison, and a surgeon wants to pull out the arrow, he says he will not let the surgeon pull out the arrow until he knows who's the man who wounded him, where he comes from, and what type of arrow, what type of bow, etc. And if he wants to know all these things, he will die before all these things are answered. So the Buddha says in the same way, if a person renounces and then he wants to know all these unbeneficial questions, then he would die before all these are answered. Malunkya Buddha, if there is the view the world is eternal, the holy life cannot be lived. And if there is the view the world is not eternal, the holy life cannot be lived. Whether there is the view the world is eternal or the view the world is not eternal, there is birth, there is aging, there is death, there are sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair, the destruction of which I prescribe here and now. If there is the view the world is finite, the world is infinite, the soul is the same as the body, etc., the holy life cannot be lived. Whether there is the view after death the Tathagata exists or not, there is birth, there is aging, there is death, there are sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair, the destruction of which I prescribe here and now. Therefore, Malunkya Buddha, remember what I have left undeclared as undeclared. I remember what I have declared as declared. And what have I left undeclared? The world is eternal, that I have left undeclared. The world is not eternal, I have left undeclared. The world is finite, I have left undeclared. The world is infinite, I have left undeclared. The soul is the same as the body, I have left undeclared, etc., etc. All these I have left undeclared. Why have I left that undeclared? Because it is unbeneficial. It does not belong to the fundamentals of the holy life. It does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. That is why I have left it undeclared. And what have I declared? This is suffering, I have declared. This is the origin of suffering, I have declared. This is the cessation of suffering, I have declared. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering, I have declared. Why have I declared that? Because it is beneficial. It belongs to the fundamentals of the holy life. It leads to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. That is why I have declared it. Therefore, Malunkya Buddha, remember what I have left undeclared as undeclared, and remember what I have declared as declared. That is what the Blessed One said. Remember, Malunkya Buddha was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. That's the end of the sutta. So you see here, the Buddha has taken a lot of trouble to explain to him why the Buddha does not declare all these views, because it has nothing to do with the holy life. It does not help you to attain nibbana, to attain enlightenment and end birth, aging, dying, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, all that sorrow. But the Buddha says, he declares the Four Noble Truths because it is beneficial, because it belongs to the fundamentals of the holy life, and leads to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, direct knowledge, enlightenment, and nibbana. That's why the Buddha declares the Four Noble Truths. So the Buddha said, what he has not taught is not important. What he has taught is important. That's why he only teaches what is important to us. So there's one sutta. One day the Buddha was talking to his disciples. He took up a handful of leaves in his hand and he asked his disciples, which is more, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in the forest? And the disciples said, the leaves in your hand are very few compared to the leaves in the forest. Bhagavan. So the Buddha said, in the same way, what I know is like the leaves in the forest. What I teach is like the leaves in my hand. So what the Buddha teaches is just the essentials. What he knows, a lot of things are not important to us. If we want to know too many things, we will die before we can know all these things. So life is too short. Our problem is that life, the cycle of rebirths, births and rebirths is suffering. So our problem is to end our suffering, not to find out a lot of things about this world. Nowadays, we have this information explosion. Nowadays, a lot of people like to go into the internet, find out a lot of things, waste a lot of time, getting a lot of knowledge. But a lot of that knowledge is not helpful to us. At the end of the day, when you are about to die, all the information you know is not important. And you will realize it's only the Dhamma that is important in life. Okay, I'll end here, I think. Nothing to discuss. Put nearer your mouth. Is that stated there? It's the same thing, lah. Same thing. The point here is breathe in and out, experiencing the whole body of the breath. So different persons will notice differently. So you don't have to worry. You just know that you try to notice the breath as a body. How much of it you notice, different persons will experience differently. Yes, when you have a deep breath, you can feel it right inside now. And when you have a shallow breath, you only feel it at around the nostril. So when you start meditating, your breath is a bit coarse, a bit not refined yet. Then you are taking deep breaths, so you notice deep breaths. As you sit longer, the breath becomes finer and finer and more tranquilized. Then you only notice the short breaths. Yeah, that's because of sloth and torpor. But it doesn't matter. You just know, even though you can't notice the breath properly, as long as you can differentiate whether it's an in-breath or an out-breath, that's good enough. And usually you can do that because of the movement of your abdomen and all that. You can tell whether you're breathing in or breathing out. Okay. Not really. You can practice in any order you want. So there is no fix. It's not that you're supposed to practice in this order. In other suttas, the Buddha would explain it different order. So there's no fixed order. It's up to you which one you want to practice more first. Whether it's on the breath, on metta, or impermanence, or boundless of the body, etc. Except that you notice in the beginning, the Buddha says you should meditate until the mind becomes unmoving, strong, unmoving like earth, water, fire, wind, and space.
One says meditate on joy, meditate on compassion. When you meditate, do you actually think the word, or because now I'm feeling very now I'm focusing on breath, so now I'm going to focus on compassion. Do I focus on compassion, the word, or feel? How do I meditate on that? If I want to get now, what do I actually do? When they talk about procedures, they say that a lot in certain discourses that you also says, people are planning a husband to walk a life, meditate on things. How does that occur?
Well, that is the method of meditation on loving kindness in the suttas, and the meditation on loving kindness that is taught by monks nowadays is a bit different. In the sutta we find that the Buddha told his disciples to attain the jhana first, at least the first jhana, which you do by meditating on the breath or on the kasina. Kasina meaning earth, or meditate on fire, or meditate on color, or whatever, until the mind becomes one-pointed. Then after that only, the Buddha says, then you practice meditation on loving kindness by reading one quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, the fourth quarter, all around. That is the way taught by the Buddha. But nowadays, people teach by chanting, may I be well and happy and all that, which is not the way taught by the Buddha. But if we, of course, it's difficult to practice the way taught by the Buddha to get the jhanas first. But we can still practice it on a low level by showing loving kindness. As mentioned previously, the Buddha says, when we live with others, we should have harmony, and one way to do that is to practice loving kindness outwardly and inwardly through the body, speech, and the mind. The body means by your body actions, you try to show loving kindness, and by verbal language, by our verbal speech, we also use words to show our loving kindness, and also through thoughts, to have thoughts of loving kindness to others. So it is through these three karmas that we can practice loving kindness, and people can kind of see or feel that you have loving kindness.
So, in other words, it's very difficult to do most of what Buddha says when he says, for example, when he sat all afternoon in the suit and meditated on this is not mine, this is not myself. Obviously, I'm capable of doing that for an hour ago. That's obviously good enough to worry that at least the first jhana at this point to be able to do that. Is that correct?
If you, in the Buddha's teachings, before you can see clearly, for example, this is not I, this is not mine, this is not myself, you have to get rid of the five hindrances. If you don't get rid of the five hindrances, you don't have that wisdom. You don't see clearly. So it's not possible to see clearly with the five hindrances enveloping us.
So, those five hindrances, of course, chapter once you achieve the first jhana state.
Okay, shall we end here?